One. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Americans for Limited Government podcast, and happy Friday. Please subscribe. Please, there you go, subscribe. I'm joined by ALG President Rick Manning. We've got a lot going on. Trump's surge just continues and continues and continues. He used to say we're going to be winning so much that we're going to be tired of winning. Are we at a point now where we're tired of winning?
We're not tired of winning at all, Frank. The fact is that we need to win for another 5 years in order to kind of get anywhere near where we need to be in terms of fixing this, a lot of the challenges in this country. And the swamp is as prevalent as ever, and we need to start pulling the plug on it. It's going to take at least 5 years to drain it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, we see that he's got 43% approval rating among independents, 49% approval rating. Americans are happy with the direction that the country is going. If you remember back in the mid-2000s, Americans stopped being happy with the direction the country was going. So now we're kind of getting back to where we were right around the mid-2000s. It's just, jobs are that jobs picture is looking very good. We've got a lot of people doing very well for themselves. The stock market's doing good. Trump just keeps winning and winning. Now, while we talk about that, let's talk about the other side where Michael Bloomberg was gobbled up by his own party. They're essentially saying he would get chewed up and spit out by Donald Trump. And there's a Politico article now that says certain candidates, Warren, Biden, and Buttigieg, are going broke with their campaigns. So they're not winning. Is that the best way to put it?
Well, the truth is that the Democrat, any primary process is a winnowing process, and money is the primary determiner of whether or not people get to move forward. Now, Elizabeth Warren did get a $5 million bump out of the debate the other night. So she got some money out of that. Amy Klobuchar also got some dollars out of that. As did Pete Buttigieg. But Pete Buttigieg is saying he needs to raise basically $1 million a day for the next 13 days to be able to stay competitive. The challenge is the Democrats have set up a system where they have a whole bunch of their primaries are going to occur, and a lot of delegates are going to be decided on March 3rd. And that's called Super Tuesday. And so given that, you have to be able to compete, and you have to spend money. You have to have staff in like 13 states, including California, which is the equivalent of, 10, it's equivalent of about 5 to 7 states, normal sized states. So this is a huge challenge for anybody in the primary. And Michael Bloomberg's plan all along was to spend enough money, spend so much money, that he was going to be able to run strong in the Super Tuesday primaries, knowing that most of his competitors won't be able to compete. He and Tom Steyer have been hiring the staff of their competitors who are sitting there saying, we may not have the money to continue the campaign. And so that staff is being hired away by Michael Bloomberg and by Tom Steyer. Bloomberg in particular, promising them pay through not only top pay or double the pay they were getting, but pay through the month of November. So it's unheard of in the political world to get that kind of money. So Bloomberg is basically buying up the talent, and he's buying up the ad time, and very few candidates can compete. The only candidate who can compete on money is Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders has been working on organization for years, so he can compete on money and organization, but the others are going to have to pick and choose which states they want to fight over. And ironically, California moved their primary up to be able to get a lot of attention from a lot of candidates. But what's happened is now a lot of the candidates are saying we can't afford to compete in California, so consequently we're skipping the state altogether, defeating the entire purpose of California moving up so early in the primary season.
Yes. Now, someone like Tom Steyer, it makes you wonder why he's even putting money out there if he's just not viable. But we did see he's polling well in certain primaries down the road. But
he's polling. The reason is he's got a South Carolina strategy. Tom Steyer has invested a lot of money in the environmental community, particularly the anti-fossil fuels community. And so in a place like South Carolina, he's put a lot of money into the coastal environmental groups there in South Carolina. and kind of the academic liberals and the environmental groups that really do exist and really are pretty potent along the coast of South Carolina. And so he's put a lot of money into those groups over a long period of time. And so he's hoping he'll reap the dividends of that investment by doing well in South Carolina and justifying staying in the race through Super Tuesday, where he can put significant money into buying media and attempting to make a difference in those Super Tuesday states. So the people who can't, Amy Klobuchar can't. She's not a billionaire. You've got Elizabeth Warren. She's going to pick and choose which state she's going to play in, but it's going to be really hard for her to match Bernie and Bloomberg in those Super Tuesday states. And you've got, of course, Pete Buttigieg, who, as I said before, is saying in order to compete, he needs to raise $1 million a day, and that's hard to do. So you've got this second tier of candidates who are traditional candidates, not self-funders, and as a result, Bloomberg can blow them all out of the water with cash alone, and Bernie Sanders has attracted a lot of dollars from people, ironically, from people who want to take away everybody else's dollars. So it's I don't really get the Bernie Sanders appeal, but apparently he's getting a lot of small dollar donors, and the key to small dollar donors is they vote. So he has been very successful in raising money from small dollar donors. So that's your field. It could very well, after March 3rd, be a Bernie Bloomberg race.
It just looks like Sanders ends up prevailing, in my opinion. I've often thought, someone with all the real estate holdings that Bernie Sanders has must have really done good for himself. And all along, we were led to believe he's just a poor socialist. Man,
well,
I guess I should tell people I'm a poor socialist.
Who have power is they never stay poor. And just be clear, when you're spending other people's money and you want to spend other people's money, there's always a little bit of the vig that ends up in your pocket.
Yeah, lo and behold, or better yet, ends up offshore, right? Okay, so now here's a question for you. We're hearing talk, and I know you've heard talk, that there's going to be a lookout for Russian meddling in the 2020 election. Did we not learn from all the investigations, all the testimonies, the Mueller report, which the only conclusion was Trump wasn't fully exonerated? That's the worst thing they got on the president. And we didn't learn from that. The Democrats are still going to play the Russian card?
Well, yes, because apparently it's the only thing they've got. The House Intelligence Committee, led by Adam Schiff, heard from some intelligence officials, don't know who, and here's the truth. We don't know what they said. What we know is people on the Democrat side leaked information to the New York Times and Washington Post about what they said. Now, you and I have been around this block for a long time in terms of this, and here's what we know for absolute metaphysical certitude. When Adam Schiff leaks, Adam Schiff lies. So any of those stories it makes absolutely no sense, and they won't turn out to be true. But Republicans don't leak, so consequently we don't get the actual facts. So if you really want to evaluate this is what you need to look at. The Democrat frontrunner and likely nominee is a communist. It's somebody who's honeymooned in Moscow. It's somebody who has been a long-term Soviet project and then Russian project in terms of infiltrating the American political system. So that's who the Democrats are most likely to nominate. On the other hand, Republicans are nominating somebody who's rebuilding our military, somebody who armed Ukraine, somebody who has been tough on Russia on a variety of issues, somebody who has urged Western Europe to use American natural gas to cut off their dependency upon Russian natural gas. And so and that's the guy, you're supposed to believe that that's the guy Putin wants, not the communist, not the person who has been an ally for the Soviets and then the Russians for his entirety of his 70-plus year career. So I find it hard to believe, and it doesn't make sense to why the Russians would want Donald Trump, and it doesn't make. And secondly, we know the source has got to be Schiff, and that hence we know that the leak is a lie. And so I don't believe it. I think people should just tell people they don't believe it, because Adam Schiff lies.
Yes.
And he's the one who's telling people this. So discard it. Don't allow it to seep into the meme. You know, they'll talk about it on CNN, they'll talk about it on MSNBC. But the fact of the matter is, we've been down this pathway. We know what this is, and we just need to tell them, no more leaks. If you're not willing to say it publicly, we don't want to hear it, and we want the Republicans to be able to talk about what it is also. And oh, by the way, if the Russians do want to try to influence the election, they've been trying to do that since 1936. So it's not like it's a new thing. The people who really are going to try to influence this election are the Chinese, and that's clear, because there's no doubt that China would much prefer to have Comrade Bernie in the White House over Donald Trump, who's a tough negotiator and is changing the global trading order.
Just a quick question, Rick. I remember talking to Sanders supporters back in 2016, and I would say, hey, he's a socialist. And they'd start saying, oh, well, you're a fascist. Remember, they would say that.
Yeah.
But I'd say he's a socialist. You know, and look at what it's like in China. Look at what it was like in the old Soviet Union. Do you really want that again? And they'd say, well, that was communism. And I'd say, come on. You're trying to tell me that there's a vast difference between socialism and communism? I mean, just look at the history of what happens in these. China is considered a socialist nation. They salute the hammer and sickle, but they are considered a socialist nation. So it's essentially the same thing. Why do the Sanders supporters try to differentiate between socialism and communism?
Well, they did try to differentiate because they didn't want they're willing to accept the so-called Democrat socialist label, which has a very soft tone and sounds very European and chic, versus the communist label, which sounds very harsh and mean. And so they want to rebrand collectivism to being some kind of Democrat socialism. Fact is, the difference is very simple. When the socialists or the communists take over, they don't give up power. They seek to rig the elections in a way so they can't give up, so they don't have to give up power. What is one of the Democrats' biggest things to do? They don't want voter ID. They don't want to make certain that illegal aliens can't vote, that only citizens can vote. They want to open up voting to anybody who shows up on election day, and then we'll figure it out afterwards, because they know that if they can break the electoral system, then then there's no way that they will ever lose power.
Okay, Rick.
That's what they've been doing on the election system all along. So, is Bernie Sanders a communist? Yes, he is.
Yeah.
And he's a communist because I'll give you one last proof point. Communists believe in violent overthrow of the government. Bernie Sanders had multiple campaign workers who advocated throwing their political opponents into gulags for re-education. And if a few million of them die, oh well, that's okay. It's for the good of they have to be re-educated to accept the new norm. One guy who went so far as to say, to get climate change legislation done, or laws done, we need to change the system, get rid of Congress and get rid of the judiciary, and just enact the laws that are needed to be enacted. Well, that hardly sounds democratic. And then my favorite was the guy who wanted to go, and if Bernie Sanders lost, said the cities of America will burn. So here's what you got. And you know what? Bernie Sanders didn't fire any of those people. He did not fire them. He said, "Oh, okay, well, that's too bad." He didn't even denounce them. So that's what Bernie Sanders stands for. Those are the people that are behind him. And so you have to accept them for what they are. What they are is dangerous.
Okay, we've got We've got here some quote. So one of our viewers here is leaving us some notes. J. Eleftheria, J. E. Eleftheria says Scandinavian countries are all socialist and are ranked much higher by almost every metric than the United States. Canada's socialist. America's socialist. Ever heard of Social Security? Man, dumb, they said. They also said.
Let me just deal with this. When you talk to those Scandinavian, when you talk to Denmark, they say we're not socialists. They disagree. Finland tried to have the set income idea that's so prevalent that Andrew Yang was pushing. It's bankrupted them. They're now having to run away from it as fast as they can. Sweden has been effectively is now in a position where they have been overrun by people who want to take advantage of the benefits without contributing to society. See, a lot of the Scandinavian nations had a simple advantage. They had a domestic population that didn't change. They didn't have mass immigration, and so consequently, they had a social compact that said we're going to pay about 70% of our income into the government, and we're going to have the government take care of certain things. That's what they decided as countries. But those countries are now failing because they now have mass immigration coming in of people who aren't contributing, who are unemployed, who are in fact taking the takers from the system without being contributors. In America, those who want to open our borders also want to increase our social services. Those who want to open our borders are saying we want to give socialized medicine to people who are not citizens, people who come here from elsewhere without violating our own immigration laws. So those people who sit there and want to point to Scandinavia are wrong. And they just need to look up Denmark. They need to look up what's happening in Finland. They need to look up what's happening in Sweden, just for 3 out of the 4 countries that I can point to. So so they're wrong.
Okay, now the same person, JLF Theria, says Trump's numbers are still in the low 40s. Why, with such a strong economy? We can assume he's being sarcastic in the tone there. Well, my answer to that is because of the division.
That also. Trump is between 49 and anywhere from 48 to 52% in terms of favorable, according to a number of polls. And basically, the polls, it matters who you survey. If you overweight towards Democrats or young people, you get a lower favorability rating. If you weight towards actually people who are going to vote, then you have a higher favorability. I will tell you right now that the reasons the Democrats are so scared of Bernie Sanders and being their nominee is because Bernie Sanders, they view him as destroying the down ticket, causing a lot of state house seats to be lost, a lot of congressional seats to be lost, and opportunities in the Senate to be lost. That's what they view as the future with Bernie Sanders at the top of the ticket. And that's why they're so desperate to try to steal the nomination from him. And a lot is at stake. This is a year, 2020, the people who are elected in state houses in 2020 are going to draw the maps for congressional districts and for state house districts in 2021. That means there's a whole lot of congressional seats that are going to be drawn, and depending on how they draw those lines, can make the difference of a swing of literally 60 seats in the House. So, why are the Democrats scared to death of Bernie Sanders? Because they know he'll lose to Donald Trump and it won't be close. And they know that in places like Texas, in places like North Carolina, in places like even California, they will find themselves behind the 8 ball, and their redistricting opportunities will go away. Now, California obviously has a redistricting system where they have a panel of supposed nonpartisan panel, a nonpartisan panel that actually the Democrats recruited into people who were independents, who were actually Democrats, to be on it. And so they wrote very favorable lines for themselves by that panel. But if you sit there and you have any kind of effort in California, the Republicans will pick up 4 seats in California because it's really hard to draw the lines in order to keep their current majority just based on how people are going to vote in this election.
Okay, now Robert Romano added here that Trump's approval on economy is north of 55%, and I was saying that these approval numbers, you have to take into consideration the incredible division in America. No, I mean, just getting a 55% approval rating is a miracle.
His approval rating is higher than Obama's was at this time.
Yes, and again, you would just have to call that based on good performance, and I think people are reading about the jobs numbers and the Dow and other signs that his performance is looking good. His scoreboard looks much better than it did this time.
And people are looking at their own paychecks and they're seeing they're not being threatened with losing their jobs all the time. They feel like they can go out and they can buy stuff without fear of having to default on it. They are getting raises on a regular basis. So the person out there is and they're hopeful. They have become much more hopeful about the future. And I believe that when they get to the ballot box, we have a stark contrast between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. People will say Bernie Sanders wants to reverse everything that Donald Trump is doing and reverse our entire economy. I'm doing well under our current economy, so why would I vote to change that? And that's the font that Bernie Sanders can't overcome. And he's going to get obliterated at the polls. At least that's what Democrats believe.
You probably remember the 1984 election when Ronald Reagan would be saying, "Hey, why would we ever want to go back to where we were just 4 short years ago?" Should Trump be using a line similar to that this year?
I think his change of his slogan from "Make America Great Again" to "Keep America Great" it effectively does that.
Yeah.
There's an old movie. It's not that old, but I guess it's old now. Called "Wag the Dog." Okay, and there's an incumbent president in that movie who got into some trouble, and his campaign slogan and he was up for re-election, and his campaign slogan was, "Don't change horses in midstream."
Yeah.
And it was the most benign, stupid campaign slogan in the world. But this guy won, and he won because of some other things that happened, which is what the movie's actually about. It's about manipulating the voters, using the presidency to manipulate the voters. But all the pundits at the end of the day said, we're interviewing the campaign manager, had nothing to do with the real reason the president won, and talking about his brilliant campaign of, don't change horses in midstream. And, the guy was, hailed a genius and a hero. The truth is, Americans, when things are going well, they don't change horses in midstream. So you look at it, it's just true. And the Democrats know that, and they know that because last week Obama attempted to take credit for the Trump economy. They know that because now they have to say, oh, Trump didn't do this, because if people believe that Trump did it, and majority of people do, then they're not going to vote Trump out. They have to just make it so people don't believe that Trump is responsible for the economic growth and the prosperity, because if they fail to do that, they lose. A change message loses, and Bernie Sanders is a gigantic change message.
Yeah, a huge one. Very, very, very different from the Trump team. Now, we've got a couple more topics we've got to talk about. First off, new acting director of national intelligence, the man who gives our leaders their security warnings, has been named Richard Grenell. Now, his critics say he's just a Trump yes man. He just massages Trump's shoulders. That's why he has a job. But you strongly disagree with that.
Grenell's proven himself over decades of being a quality foreign policy analyst. He served at the United Nations for a number of years in the U.S. delegation. He has been the ambassador to Germany for the Trump administration, and in a time when Grenell, he's got a long history of foreign policy. He's proven himself in tough situations, but he comes from outside of the DC establishment intelligence communities, so he's going to be able to come in, evaluate what's going on, and hopefully get rid of the deep state actors that have infiltrated every aspect of our intel community. I think the reason the Washington Post and New York Times are most upset about Grinnell is the fact that they were really hoping to get another person in there who would leak to them non-stop about what was going on, and they lose that with Grinnell coming in.
Okay, now on to something a little bit less serious here. A big rematch this weekend between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. They've had some pretty colorful press conferences.
You tell me what you think, because I can tell you that from the one thing I will not be doing is paying attention to that fight this weekend. So, but you tell me what you think, because you love this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me tell you, Tyson Fury is one of the greatest personalities in boxing history, as is Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder is probably the best puncher I've ever seen in my life, really. Tyson Fury, of course, has battled with demons such as drugs and alcohol. He's put on weight at times, well over 300 pounds, and he has struggled with a lack of focus. And I think he's back to struggling with that lack of focus. He was wearing a very baggy jacket at the most recent press conference. He says after the fight's over, he's going to go splurge on $30 hookers and cocaine. So he doesn't seem focused. Now, on the other hand, Deontay Wilder has a history with rematches where he comes meaning to destroy his opponent. He had a rematch with Berman Stavern about a year or two ago where he absolutely annihilated him in the first round. He had a rematch recently with Luis Ortiz where he just hit him with one shot and knocked him cold. And I have a feeling that he's going to absolutely destroy Tyson Fury, who seems to be out of shape, out of focus. His demons are coming back to haunt him. And I predict that Deontay Wilder scores a first-round knockout.
And there you have it. You not only have the winner, you have it by TKO, and you have it in the first round.
Yes.
So bet that if you are into gambling, which I am not and don't encourage, directly from Frank McCaffrey's mouth to your ears, you now have the key to betting that fight.
Hey, it's free enterprise. Free enterprise.
I don't care, because rounds are only 90 seconds, and it sounds like you don't think this is going to last very long.
Well, rounds are actually 3 minutes. I don't think this is going to last very long. Hey, it's free market. Hey, name one sport that is more representative of the American free market than boxing. It's just you go out and fight for money. Prize fighting, they used to call it. And man, I'll tell you, Deontay Wilder is someone who has been taking his talents and using it to make a lot of money. Tyson Fury probably could be making more, but he just struggles with his focus, and I think that's gonna get him.
Well, I assume he's going to get a big payday today, and if that's his last payday, then hopefully he doesn't.
Spend it all on cocaine.
Frank, let's just call it quits here. We're having a little technical difficulty, and so let's just bid everybody a have a great weekend. Recognize that we do have the Nevada caucus tomorrow, and they should have the results by Wednesday, Thursday next week. But we have the Nevada caucus tomorrow, and a lot of people will be declaring victory tomorrow. So pay attention to that, and have a great weekend. Enjoy your families.
All right.
Subscribe if you can, and we will bid you a sweet adieu.
I'll see you. Thanks, Rick.